Welcome to part 2 of our puzzle genre tutorial series. In this video, I want to teach you about how to actually work with these toggle pads with a bit more detail, as well as how to create your own, before we talk about in our next video about creating your own pickup objects. So these toggle pads, I've already built a template for you that you can just use quite easily. In your prefabs folder, it's called item pad. You can simply click and drag it into your world to have it appear, and I'm just going to rotate this one so that it's kind of facing the player here. And next, what I'm going to do is just connect it to something and test this thing out. So when I've added an item pad into the game, we know that it has connected to it this canvas that has its text. This all works automatically on its own, so I don't even have to worry about that subsection. I'm just going to worry about the item pad settings, and I need three things. First is the item type. Let's use the doll in this case. Make sure you spell it correctly with the proper capitalization from the name you gave the object over there. Call this doll, so I need to use the same name. Do I want this object I attach to, which is going to be this wall here, to start on or off? And I want it to start on, so I'll leave that checked. And finally, this is wall 1, so I'm just going to take this first wall and attach it here. And give this a try. So now I look over there, and it says doll. Okay, so I know I need to pick up this doll and come on over here and drop it on top of this. Bam! And that opens up that door or the wall, and if I pick it up, it closes it again. So cool, I've used the tool to build my own custom one. And I just want to show you this for interest's sake, but what if I wanted to chain some of these things together? Let's say I snag this and I rotate this around. I can actually link different features to each other. Let's let this new item pad be connected to, I don't know, let's make it a cube. And I want it to start its connected object to be off. And I'm going to connect to it the item pad I just made previously, this guy right here. So this pad will control this existing or not, and then this controls the wall. Let's see how this works. Now, that doll item pad is missing because this cube pad is controlling it to be in an off state. So if I pick up a cube and a doll, and I come over here now, if I put the cube on this, it makes the doll pad show up, and then the doll pad can be triggered for the wall. Now, if I take this away, technically it kind of leaves it as is, and that's all right. But if I want to be able to turn that off again, I have to be able to go and pick this up. Now, let me just actually do it. So, quick testing thing here. Technically, I think I should be able to pick up this doll and have it turn off again. So, just having that on or off, the doll controls the wall itself by disappearing. So, just something that so that you know kind of how those different features work, and you can combine these things together to interact in interesting ways. Keep that in mind while you're designing your game ideas. Next, I want to show you how to make a custom one of these yourself. Excuse me. There's a clunkiness to working with our item pads right out of the box, which is that technically we can change all the settings to these things to become something custom and unique, but it's actually probably easier just to make one from scratch. For example, if I try to actually change the way this thing looks by stretching it out, notice the text also gets stretched. And there's ways we can avoid doing that, but might as well just learn how to make one from scratch because it allows us to do everything we want without any of this finickiness. So what I'm going to do is maybe I want to have, instead of a pad on the ground, maybe I want to have like something a little bit cooler. Maybe in Blender I make like a treasure chest to put an object inside, or maybe I want to have something with a kind of a boundary around it. Let's make a 3D object. Let's make an empty. That's going to be an organizational folder. I'm going to call this treasure chest. Check this out. We're going to make a kind of a pretty cool custom object here. And inside the treasure chest, let's just position it kind of where I want it. I think this looks good enough for now. And maybe move this down a little bit. Inside this treasure chest, I want to make a cube. And this cube, I'm going to shrink down to be kind of like the siding of a chest of some kind, maybe a little bit smaller because my player's not the tallest thing in the world. And maybe I'll make it a little bit narrower. And I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste this, move this over to the side. And this is going to be a pretty bad treasure chest, but just bear with me. I'm going to copy and paste another copy, and I'm just going to rotate this. Maybe I'll just make it exactly 90 on the dot to look better. And we'll make it a little bit shorter. Our goal is to kind of fill this gap here. It needs to be a little bit longer. Good enough for now. Let's stick this near the end. copy and paste it, and put it on the other side. So in here, I have a little bit of a chest that I could have items inside of. And I actually want to make it so that I have to drop something into this box. I'm just trying to clear up that little bit of finicky edging there. Good enough for now. But inside of this, I want to make a final flattened out but wide enough section. Not that wide, a little bit narrower. Oh, maybe it needs to be a tiny bit wider. And I'm going to lower it to the floor. So that's at the bottom here. And this is now going to be kind of my, I guess it's a box more than a treasure chest. There's no lid. I'm just going to call this a box, I suppose, that I want the item to be dropped into. So what I need to be considering here is this item pad is the thing that had to be touched by this object to trigger the response. In this box, I only want this bottom inside part to trigger that response. I don't want the edges to do so. The item has to be inside, not touching the outside. One of the best ways to mimic functionality of an object is to really just examine it and copy its functionality. So this item pad, we'll notice it has some settings that are required for this feature to work. It needs a renderer, which is the visual. Notice mine already has a renderer. It needs a box collider or some kind of a collider, which mine already has. Perfect. It needs this item trigger script. So I still need that. So I'm going to go into my scripts and find my item trigger script and drag it onto the inspector. And now this is attached. And now I can state what type of item I want to be connected to this. Maybe, I don't know, let's call this the sphere. Put the ball into here. And the thing that it's connected to, what should it be? I don't know, let's just for fun make it the actual world's floor itself. Why not? So let's go in here, and so this, I'm going to call this the bottom. Let's rename it so it's a bit more clear. And this plane, I'm going to have this be connected to this. So this is kind of a trap for the player. Don't put the sphere in the box, otherwise you're going to be, well, run into some trouble here. So now that I have these things connected, let's go run this and kind of see what happens. If I take the sphere and I come over here and I drop it inside, I see something here, which is that, well, it actually doesn't drop in. One part of the problem here is the sphere is kind of too big. So maybe in my game, I could actually have different size spheres so that one of them could actually fit. So what if I take my prefab of a sphere, put it over here, just so it's closer to it, and I'm going to scale this thing down quite a bit to be a size that looks like it'll fit in that box. Let's get a sense of things here. Does it look like it might fit? So just some examples of some game design testing here. Cool, looks like that's going to fit. And the sphere looks like it might be happy enough. So let's run this again and give this a test to see what's going to happen. And let's pick up my sphere. This one, let's drop it in. And this sphere doesn't seem to want to drop. What's going on here? Well, let's do some troubleshooting. Don't get frustrated with yourself if you have issues with the things that you're creating, because sometimes things don't always work exactly as planned. And something I'm noticing here is that my sphere is missing a rigid body, which is surprising because I thought I built the initial one to have a rigid body, and it looks like I actually broke it during my testing. So I'm going to fix the sphere so it works first time for you. A little bit of fixing up of things here. Now I've attached a rigid body, and now I should have one to this sphere as well. Perfect. So that means the sphere is allowed, a rigid body allows it to have physics. So now it's actually able to fall to the ground. Perfect. Fell to the ground. Now I have to get lined up and try to pick up the sphere and drop it. And, oh, it got resized because I applied the other thing to it, or maybe it's just a little bit too big yet. So let's just shrink it down a little bit more so it fits. Just doing some testing and some troubleshooting as I work through things here. So we have this nice small ball, kind of hard to find in the game. Maybe that's a good mechanic to have. Let's try to drop it in. And I know exactly what's going on here. So I've made a small ball, but in the game, the way that it works is that it actually creates another copy of the ball based off of the size of things that are in the prefab. So this strategy actually requires me to attach a new custom object to my character to have it work, which I'll teach you in the next tutorial. For now, I'm just going to make this really quick. I'm going to call this pickup mini sphere, and I'm going to create a new prefab for this. The mini sphere, an original prefab, just a little bit smaller of a sphere. Perfect. And now my player, I'm going to add one more thing, which is going to be the mini sphere. And I'm going to call this mini sphere. Where's my naming here? Mini sphere. Let's just get this set up like this so that it's labeled like this. And now this doesn't require a sphere. It requires a mini sphere. So here I'm really customizing a system, which is perfect because this is exactly what you might need to do when you make your game. So now when I pick up this mini sphere, I should actually see that it's going to drop the right sized one instead. Wonderful. And now when I drop this into the box, here we go, the mini sphere falls in. So now we've fixed a bunch of those issues, but we have one issue left to fix, which is this error. Object reference not set to an instance of an object. All of our item triggers have this text floating above it, and we need this text to exist to be able to have this object function, because we need to know what item goes in. It's kind of a part of the mechanics of this game. So how do we create this floating text? Okay, well, make sure you pause and rewind if you need any more assistance with this, but here's what we're going to do. With the part that has the trigger on it, I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to add a user interface object called a canvas. This is the place where text is allowed to exist. So I'm going to generate a canvas, and then inside of that canvas, I'm going to generate a text mesh pro text object. This is the text. Maybe I'll call this the box text. This text is going to be what shows the information floating above it. However, we have to do one more thing to get it into position, which is we actually have to move the canvas to be in this correct position here. So follow these steps to do so. With the canvas selected, click over under the canvas in the inspector on world space rather than screen space overlay. This is going to make the canvas actually be able to appear in our world. Next, I need to scale it down quite a bit. I usually find 0.001 and 0.001 for X and Y is a great size. And finally, with the canvas selected, I'm going to go game object, move to view. And now this has been moved really close to where I want it. All that's left to do is maybe just kind of adjust it over here a little bit until it's kind of above the box. And to see exactly what the text would look like, I'm going to choose the box text object and actually type in some text here. Testing, like the other objects. Now it looks like the text is quite small inside of this. So what I need to do is actually auto size this text. And, well, let's see. Maybe this is all a little bit too small. Let's scale this up. Maybe it's 0.01. 0.01. And this box text is a little bit awkwardly sized still. So really squished in there. Interesting, and really wide. So that 0.001 was the right sizing. Let's set this back. And now we have to make this box text a little bit bigger. Let me just troubleshoot something really. All right, so what we need to do here is take our scaling tool on our box text and click on the scaling and drag it until it stretches it out to be a good size for our screen here. I'm going to drag it out sideways as well. Stretch it out like this. Oops, that wasn't the stretch. This red tool to stretch it out, and the green one to stretch it out like this till it's about the size that I want. Cool, and now that this is sized properly, I can have this auto size the text inside of it if I want. I can even over here change the color. All sorts of text change settings over here. I can even center it if I'd like to. And now this allows me to actually position the canvas to have this text appear where I want. And maybe I'll even rotate the canvas so that it's facing this direction. So I need to do a little bit of just editing of that content to get that text into the right position for what I want it to show when, well, for what type of thing the type of object needs to go in. And with this canvas in place here, my project should be able to automatically detect that canvas and be able to pull that object in place here. So it says mini sphere. Perfect. It automatically picks up what needs to go into there. And if I drop this in, this goes inside, and it fell right through the world. So where did my mini sphere go? Did it go underneath the earth? Let's troubleshoot one more time. All right, final thing to fix. Right now when we drop the sphere in, nothing happens. One more setting that we have to make sure is the same as our other item pads is the collider actually needs to be a trigger. Turning trigger on means that it actually triggers a response. And since the purpose of these things is to trigger a response, we need this trigger to be selected. So I need to go into my box, onto the bottom that's triggering the events, and in the collider, make sure that the is trigger is turned on. The one last step to get this whole kind of more complex thing built. And now if I head over and I pick up my mini sphere and I drop it in place, oh, there we go. The floor of the world drops out and all of us fall and we're teleporting back and forth again and again and again. And maybe that's not the best mechanic, but it shows you that this can work. And I've built a much more complicated object that's custom and that still works as a trigger pad in a much more interesting way. And I love to see you creating all sorts of unique creative trigger pads that maybe aim to have kind of visual guides for the players, maybe aim to trick them in some way or be a little bit more secretive. Lots of cool things you can do. I could even, like, if I want to make this a treasure chest, I can have another toggle remove the lid so that I can actually drop this ball in after the fact, so that I'm actually able to put this lid or the object in once the lid has been removed. Chain them together like these. There's so many things you can play with. Okay, I think that's more than enough for toggle pads. In the next video, we're going to cover creating a little bit more of your own pickup objects.